So I'm here today to talk to you about how to be a more effective agent of change. A change agent, a person who is promoting good ideas, new ideas, and helping them spread and get anchored in society and systems around the world, or in your own community, or in your home. Now, the particular ideas that I'm passionate about have to do with sustainability, this notion that we have to think long-term, live within the boundaries of the planet, make sure everybody has enough, that the poor are lifted up to a level of prosperity that's equal to ours, that we're healthy and happy. And it's a complex idea, this notion of sustainability. So I've spent a lot of time trying to communicate about it. I write books about sustainability, I give workshops, and I do training programs, I consult to large organizations. I even write songs about sustainability. So I get a little desperate to communicate this idea because I think it's so important. This idea that we live on a small planet that is floating in space, that has very clear boundaries, and that in a very short span of time is going to have 9 or 10 or even 12 billion people, all of whom have to share those resources, all of whom have a right to the same kind of quality of life that we here in Sweden enjoy. So in talking with that complex idea with some other friends and scientists a number of years ago, we were trying to figure out how to make that more easy to communicate. And one of my friends said, what we need is something like a new compass, some way to show us the direction for a new way towards a sustainable world. And I had one of those light bulb moments. Compass, right, north, east, south, west. You could just change those letters to mean nature, all the resources and environment that we have to take care of. Economy, the processes of changing nature into stuff and services so that everybody has what they need. S for society, the collective structures, the governments, the institutions that make sure that we all have a fair and reasonable quality of life. And then finally, quality of life itself, wellness, happiness, health. So that little symbol became something called the Sustainability Compass, and I'm happy to say that it's sort of spread around the world now. It's used by companies as their platform for managing and directing their operations towards sustainability. It's used by schools in the classroom as well as in the boardroom to try to manage their operations, and that's great. So I'm very happy about the way that idea has spread. But the idea of sustainability is not enough because we actually have to make it happen. We need the change part. And that's where this notion of sustainable development comes in, this word that you've heard the United Nations use many times. The key word there is development, because development is about change. So when I started to really grapple with this, I realized that if you're going to make sustainability happen, then you have to understand something about making change happen. And you have to also make these processes that are rather complicated, simple and graspable. So invented another thing. In this case, it's a little triangle that builds up a way of understanding how to do sustainable development, starting with indicators and information, gathering information about the trends, things that are happening in this world, happening to you, happening to your community, your company, and then using that information to build a systems map to understand the links between things, how cause and effect are hooked up and create feedback loops that speed up processes in either good ways or bad ways so that we can find the leverage points for change. Where should we direct our energy so that we can make change in a positive way? That's where innovation comes in, because then you know where to make the change that you want to make. Do you need to change the policy, the technology? Do you need to change mindsets or ways of teaching or anything else? And of course, once you've got an idea for what to change, you need a good strategy for how to implement that and turn it into action. So that little triangle became a kind of a mantra for me about how to help people work their way from basic worry about the state of the world to real action based on systems thinking. And the way these things go, then it wasn't too long before I was sitting down with friends again and realizing we could combine these two ideas, the compass of sustainability, that triangle of movement from ideas or indicators rather to action, and we turned it into this, a three-dimensional pyramid. So this looks like an iconic sort of quasi-artistic image, but what it is actually is a workshop process that we use for training and planning, helping people to develop, working in collaborative ways, in teams and in groups, new ideas for how to move from where we are now to the kind of future that we all want, a sustainable future. Working through the indicators and the trends, using all four of those compass points, the nature, economy, society, and well-being, gathering information, doing systems maps, and then beginning to develop ideas about change. Here, for example, are a bunch of people in Calgary, Canada. These are mayors, city councilors, officials of various kinds, working to develop ideas for their next steps forward on sustainable development for the Calgary, Canada region. Here, on the other hand, are, by the way, they made a very big pyramid, as you see, kind of 2 meters tall, very Canadian to think big. Whereas the French, in Paris, made this tiny little pyramid. It's almost symbolic. It's very French, It's not like, a real pyramid. It's a symbol of a pyramid. They were thinking about how to link the northern cities with the cities in Africa to collaborate together on climate change. What can we do together? They were seeking ideas for that. Here are coastal planners in the Middle East working together on how to make more green tourism and save the fisheries, for example, or Tibetan women in China planning their NGO's strategy. Here are Botswanan water officials. Here are Nepalese youth working on employment opportunities for themselves. So when I say it's spread around the world, I mean it. It's really kind of all over the place. And at this point, thousands of people have participated in these workshops, which is, great. But it wasn't an accident. It happened because we applied some ideas about how to make that spreading of ideas happen. And one of the things we did, we finally figured out, boy, even our idea of how to simplify this process is kind of complicated. So we simplified it. We called it Pyramid 2030 or Pyramid Light. And we made it easy. Anybody can go to this website, download a manual, pyramid PowerPoint slides, and run their own workshop. We made it fun because it's actually really fun to get into these kinds of thinking processes. And gosh, what causes what, and what can we do to make change? And most importantly, we made it free. Which means that everybody in Africa or anywhere else who can download something from the internet can do this. So what I really want to call your attention to now is not so much the compass or the pyramid, but how I just changed in the way I was talking about those things. When I started my talk, I was talking like an innovator, an inventor. I was thinking about the idea and where it came from and my moment of elation when I had that eureka moment and all the theory behind it. But then by the end of that, I was talking more about how we spread the idea and telling you about its benefits and why it might be easy and fun to do. I had changed into the role of what we call a change agent, someone who can communicate change. And what I'd like to do now is show you very quickly a model for how you can understand how to map a change process and more quickly and more effectively plan your own attempts to spread a good idea. The model is called amoeba. And if you remember your old biology, an amoeba is a single-celled organism with a membrane, and the way it eats is kind of funny. It sticks out a pseudopod towards a little paramecium or whatever it's after, and sort of engulfs it and then sloshes up around it. And my old friend and boss and colleague, Robert Gilman, made this beautiful statement. He said, cultures, groups, are kind of like amoebas when it comes to new ideas. And I had this, again, kind of ping moment and started thinking, let's work on that. So for example, here's an amoeba. Think of it as your organization or your community, and you've got a new idea out there you'd like to bring into it, solar power or new ways of teaching, whatever it is. And somebody at the edge of that amoeba begins to stretch its membrane towards that idea, engulfs it, brings it in, it begins to multiply, and then it's kind of in. Now notice two things about this. One is, change did not begin in the middle of this amoeba. It began at the edge, with people willing to stretch the boundary. Two is, notice that the DNA, the control center in the middle of this amoeba, didn't have a clue that change was happening until it was already in. Yeah, and this happens a lot, the CEO of the corporation finds out about the revolution after it's happened. So I began thinking a lot more about this, and I thought, well, how can we make this a little easier for people to really grasp and turn into a kind of a strategic tool? So I put that amoeba under let's call it the cultural microscope. And this is what I found. There were a whole lot of very interesting roles in that amoeba that routinely show up in organizational, cultural change processes. On the right side of that image are the processes that are pulling the amoeba towards the new idea. The innovators with their brilliant, aha moments, the change agents with their great communication skills. On the other side of the amoeba are the forces that are kind of trying to slow it down, the laggards who just aren't interested in the amoeba, the reactionaries who are actually against it. And in order to really grasp this, I thought I'd walk you through these roles one by one. And once you have this map in your head, you'll be able to make your own amoeba map. You can draw pictures and say, right, that person's doing this to me right now. And you can avoid them or seek them out depending on what you need. So here are the roles in the amoeba. First, we have the innovator. That was me at the beginning of my talk, passionate about the idea, so identified with it, you don't even really remember how to communicate. You're kind of like into the details because what you need is a change agent, someone who understands how to translate that into the things that people are really interested in so that they can get it and adopt it. Now, who are the change agents talking to? They're talking to transformers. Transformers are the opinion leaders, the ones who understand that every new idea that comes into a system transforms it. So they're careful about which ideas they sort of bless and say, yeah, that's a good one. So you can think of the experts or the journalists or the people that everybody looks to for advice. And if they say, yes, that's a good idea, well, then what happens? Well, all the mainstreamers say, okay, I'll do that. Think about your mobile phone. You didn't study it carefully. You just saw everybody else doing it, and you bought one. That's mainstream action in terms of idea spreading. Now, not everybody likes new ideas. There are laggards who are still kind of stuck with yesterday's ideas, much less keeping up with the new stuff today. And they just don't like change. Things are fine the way they are. Why should I adopt anything new when it's working? That's different, however, from the reactionaries who are actively against whatever the change is. So you're coming in, you want to bring in this new idea, and suddenly you find someone's trying to totally delegitimize what you're up to. Well, it's because they're a reactionary to your idea. Now, guess what? Your idea may be really stupid, in which case the reactionary is saving the amoeba from some terrible fate. So not all reactionaries are bad, This is not a moral story. This is just how things work. And you want to avoid reactionaries if you've got a good idea, because they will stop or kill your change process if you're not attentive to what they're doing. Then there are the iconoclasts. These are, well, if you think about Greenpeace, a classic iconoclastic organization, they're not known for spreading new ideas. They're known for spreading awareness of the problem, getting up on the oil derrick and saying, this is wrong. And they might even attack the people with the new ideas if they don't think the ideas are actually good ideas, for example. Then there are my favorite in the amoeba, the curmudgeons. Why bother with these new ideas? I mean, it's not going to work. And, I did the same thing 20 years ago. Nobody listened to me. And besides, even if you do succeed, it's not going to make anything better. And people are cows anyway, so just give it up. Do you know anybody like that? Oh, yeah. And, if they show up at your meeting where you're trying to introduce your new idea, oh, you're in bad trouble. Yeah. They can be redeemed, by the way. Most of them are former change agents. They just got bitter. But there's a whole lot of work, to kind of redeem them. So you might not waste time there. Then there are recluses. These are the people who don't want to get involved. Hey, I'm busy with my research. Don't talk to me about these solar panels. Or, gotta breathe and do yoga. Don't get so worried about these change dynamics. Recluses kind of hold themselves out of the process. And then there are those controllers, the ones who think they're in charge. And if they find out about your idea early in the process, they can either super accelerate what you're doing, or they can really make it tough for you. So you've got to make sure your timing is right when you talk to controllers. Okay, so how does this work in practice? A quick story. A number of years ago, a friend of mine, Herman Mulder, was a vice president at a bank in Holland, and he had this idea that he was promoting called the equator principles, how to make more ethical lending practices. But banks weren't interested, and Citigroup was really not interested. They were reactionaries to this idea. So along came a great iconoclastic group, Rainforest Action Network. And what did they do? Well, they started hanging banners from buildings. They even ran full-page ads in the International Herald Tribune saying that the chairman of Citigroup was an international criminal. And actually, this apparently really happened. The guy's grandkids saw the ad and said, hey, Grandpa, you're an international criminal. Well, this worked, and Citigroup changed from being a reactionary against the idea of the equator principles to being a transformer and being one of the early adopters. And then all the other banks said, okay, well, if Citigroup's doing it, I guess we should do it. Now, over 70 banks have signed up to this voluntary set of ethical principles for lending so that they don't inadvertently destroy ecosystems or uproot an indigenous tribe when they're making those kinds of loans. So that was a fantastic story and a really classic story of what to do when you're trying to advance ideas. And here's a little acronym, AMEBA. A, adapt to the innovation so that you make sure you fit it for the purpose that you're trying to promote. M, mobilize the change agents because they're the ones who will help you get the message across. O, organize the transformers because they're the ones who will make that multiplication factor happen. Make it easy for the mainstreamers. E is for easy, so they can easily adopt it. Then it's build momentum. B for build at the margins of the amoeba. Don't try to go straight into the center. And finally, A, avoid the reactionaries and the controllers until you're totally ready. Okay? So that's it. That's amoeba speak in a nutshell, and I hope you'll use those ideas to spread sustainability ideas like the compass of sustainability or that pyramid I was telling you about. But listen, not all ideas are good. Not all ideas are good. If you haven't done your homework by thinking about the systemic complexity, you might be introducing a really bad idea. So I thought I'd close by telling you a story, a cautionary tale of what happens when people don't do this right. This really happened on the island of Borneo in 1950-something when the World Health Organization tried to eradicate malaria. And I thought, just to make it a little more lively, instead of telling you the story, I'll sing it. Once upon a time down in Borneo, there was a UN group called the WHO. They were doctors and bureaucrats from every nation working for the World Health Organization. Now, the key word in there is health. Well, they said, we've come to take care of you and cure this bad outbreak of malaria. It's carried by mosquitoes, you can plainly see. So they sprayed the whole countryside with DDT. Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And the people slept sound in their beds till their thatched roofs fell down on their heads. Now, how did that happen? There's a parasitic wasp whose eggs all hatch in these little caterpillars that feed on thatch. But the DDT killed all the wasps at once. And so the caterpillars ate the roofs for lunch. That's what you call a rude awakening. Well, the bureaucrats said, we can fix this up. We'll put a new tin roof on every hut. We know it's kind of ugly and they're noisy too, but it's something that the caterpillars just can't chew. Well, they had a point there, but the people were not happy still, for they all became desperately ill. Well, how did that happen? The lizards ate the bugs and got eaten by the cats who got a dose of DDT, and that was that. And so the rats went on this frenzied rat rampage, no cats around, and caused outbreaks of typhoid and sylvatic plague. That's right, the plague, brought to you by the World Health Organization. Well, the bureaucrats knew things were out of hand, so they gathered stray cats from every land. They gave them little parachutes like G.I. Joe, and they pushed them out of airplanes over Borneo. Remember, I'm not making this up. To make sure that you don't get me wrong, here's the moral of my little song. The Earth's a very complicated place. It's a living web of delicate lace. So if someone tries to tear it up, say no, or you'll be parachuting cats into Borneo. Hey!